Hi, welcome to Julio's Bar. Today we're going to talk about hardware. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the tools we use in the bartender world. I'm going to give you my perspective on things, the things I use, the things I like, and even though I'm going to probably repeat it many times over the video, just know that there are many ways to do things, and sometimes many ways are the right way. There is just not one way to do things. So let's get started. And let's start from the bartending spoon. You can actually use any spoon you want to stir your drinks. But here are a few tips to choose your bartender spoon if you want to buy one. First of all, they usually come in two types, one with a fork on the other side and one without the fork. The length of the spoon also might differ. One thing to notice about bartender spoon is that it has a spiral running along its length. This spiral helps you twisting the spoon in a certain motion, and so it comes in right-handed and left-handed versions. The right-handed version is gonna help you twist like this in a clockwise motion. This spiral might be coarser or more tight, like in this case. It might be wider, like this, or thinner, like this. And depending on how you're planning on using your spoon, this makes a difference. The wider grain and shorter spoon, I think they are better suited to people that like to keep their fingers in one position like this and then twist the spoon like this, which I cannot do because this is not my favorite technique. That's why I prefer a longer spoon without the fork on the other side, because my technique is to go around the glass in this motion. So my hand is basically drawing a circle around the circumference of our mixing glass. And the way I hold the spoon is to put the three middle fingers on one side, while the pinky and the thumb goes on the other side, like this. And I put my spoon right in there. And that's it. And then I let the spoon almost flow, like really touching it just slightly and rotating it like this. I started first with actually just the middle finger and the index finger on one side and the other three fingers on the other side, like this. But I switched to this new position a few years ago and I got used to it. I think it gives me a really smooth twist of the spoon. Of course, if you don't want to bother with any of this technique, you don't have to bother. You can just do like this and mix your drink. Your cocktail is gonna taste exactly the same. It's just a bit for style. One thing you might wanna find out about your bartender spoon is exactly how much liquid it keeps. A standard bartender spoon is supposed to keep 5 milliliters of liquid. Now, from my experience, my bartending spoon holds less than that. Let's measure it right away. And I tell you to do this because bartender spoons sometimes hold less liquid than the 5 milliliters. So, if for example, I just fill my spoon like this, and move it, it measures 2.8, 2.9 grams, which makes the content of the spoon about 3 milliliters, which is way shorter than 5. That's why when you pour liquids with your bartender spoon, you want to make it really full and usually overflow it a bit, like that. Yeah, I got 5.3 grams. By overflowing it slightly, you go to the right amount of 5 milliliters, at least for my spoon. Your spoon might vary. But as we are talking about measuring, let's talk about jiggers. To measure the ingredients of your cocktail, you might use any measuring cup, measuring device you find. And actually some producer like OXO and I think Simon Difford, they sell their own jigger that's shaped more like a normal beaker for the kitchen, and that's completely fine. Actually, that might be the best, more accurate way of measuring liquids in your cocktail. Now, professional bartender, they almost never use such implements unless we measure something in bigger amounts. But we use these things called jiggers, which usually come in this shape. All these are double. Sometimes you will see ones that they only have one side that you can use. You can see chubbier ones like this one, which is my favorite, but some people prefer slimmer ones, like a bit like this, or even more slim, longer ones. Some have indication in the inside of the milliliters or ounces you want to pour. Mine, they all have some indication. Like this one goes up to 2 ounces, the other side go to 1 ounce, and it's my standard to use. But I have other ones like this one goes on one side to 45 milliliter or 1.5 ounces, and the other goes to 30, and he has signs for 10, 15 and 20 milliliter. Jiggers also come in weirder sizes like this one. This one on one side goes to 7 and 14 and the other goes to 22 and 29. And also you might find jigger more specific to the UK, which measure 50 milliliters, 25 milliliters and stuff, because the standard size of a portion, I think, of alcohol in UK is 50 milliliters. I prefer 30 milliliters and its multiple and subsets, because 30 milliliter corresponds more or less to an ounce. So that makes it really easy to translate recipes from the American ounce system to milliliters and the metric system. Now, why we use jiggers in the bartending world, again, it's probably just culture and style. There is no real reason for you to have to use these ones. You might use them if you like it, but again, any implement that measure liquids in the amounts between, let's say, 7.5 milliliter and 60 milliliters is gonna be perfect as long as it's accurate. So now let's talk about shakers. Shakers, they come in 3 kinds. One kind, the French, I don't have, but it's minor kind. The 2 more common kinds are these ones, Cobbler shaker and Boston shaker. The Cobbler shaker is iconographically superior. When you're portraying something relating to bartender, if you depict a shaker like this, that means cocktail. It comes in 3 parts, as you can see: a container, a lid with a strainer attached to it, and a proper cap that seals the whole thing. In Japan, most bartenders use actually this shaker, and they do a really nice wavy shake like this. It's really classic, but it's not my favorite because it's less versatile and it really holds only 1 portion at a time. Unless you buy the big version of this, it's quite rare though. So I never quite use this ever. My favorite kind of shaker since the 90s is the Boston shaker, and I like it because of its simplicity. It's just really 2 cups, 1 big and 1 small. Such a container, if you need to, can also be matched to glasses like this, or transparent containers like this, if you like. It can also double as a mixing glass if you don't have one available. Just use the bigger one like this, and you're fine. It's big enough for 2 or 3 cocktails at once. It does lock simply onto each other like this. And depending on the age and the quality of your shaker, at first it might be hard to separate one side from the other. Sometimes when I use a new shaker or a shaker I never used before, I have problems separating them because with the coldness of the ice they get stuck to each other. But with time, experience, and using always the same tool, this thing becomes easier. One thing to notice is that this kind of shaker comes in weighted and not weighted version. This is a weighted shaker. I prefer it because it gives you a little bit more meat when you are shaking. But of course, I shake mostly at home. I don't shake all night. If you have to shake hundreds of cocktails in one night, maybe the weight is detrimental. The weight also, I find, gives the ice in the shaker a cuter noise. It sounds better when you shake it, but that might be just me. One thing the Boston shaker requires that the Cobbler shaker doesn't is a separate strainer. So now let's talk about strainers. And the two main strainers in this world are the Hawthorne, this one with the spring, and the Julep. This is just like a bended piece of sheet metal. Now, most of the time I use the Hawthorne strainer because it's simply genius. If the size is right or just about right, the spring is gonna help you filter many different kinds of containers. Like if it's this one, if it's this one, more or less, you can fit it to mixing glasses and so on. The only problem I find with the Hawthorne strainer is that if you have a juice with lots of pulp that you have to strain and you plan on double straining your cocktail, more on that in a second, all the pulp is gonna get accumulated in this spring. It's gonna make it harder to filter and harder to clean. So sometimes I like to use a julep strainer. It's more simple, it lets more liquid and other stuff come through, but if you're planning on straining your cocktail a second time, that doesn't matter, that just helps. One of the problems with the julep strainer is that it has to be just the right size. So for example, this julep strainer doesn't fit quite right here, it's too small, while it fits perfectly here. About how to use a julep strainer, I use it this way, putting the concave side inside the container, but I saw Bartender using the other way around. It also depends on the shape of your julep strainer, because they come in many shapes and forms. Now let's talk about fine strainers. I shopped around a lot at the beginning searching for the cheapest fine strainer around. I was like, a fine strainer is just like a tea strainer. There gotta be many of these kind of tools around in kitchen suppliers and stuff. As it turns out, the perfect one is actually only sold in bartender stores. And that's because this strainer, which I think is called Italian strainer, besides having a V shape that helps pouring the liquids in the right place you want to pour them, it has the perfect coarseness of a filter. And that's important because too fine a filter is going to make it hard to pass your cocktail through it. And a too loose a filter is going to let stuff through that you don't want. So in the end, I was like, let me just buy a professional fine strainer from the bartender store, and it's totally worth it. It's so much better than the other ones. I always use this fine strainer, except when I have to filter tea or spices that I ground to a powder. In that case, I use a finer strainer like this one, which is just a tea strainer. This is gonna filter everything better, but as I said, if you have some pulp in your cocktail, it's gonna make it so much harder to get the liquid to pass through. And now let's finally talk about mixing glasses. As I said, if you have a Boston shaker, you can just use half of a Boston shaker as a mixing glass, or any other container really. But the experience to mix a Martini or a Manhattan in a proper mixing glass is quite nice. Mixing glasses, they come in all kind of sizes, as you can see. My favorite shape is probably this one, a classic shape. This is a slightly larger mixing glass that's really good to mix 2 or 3 cocktails at once. One thing you might want to check is to check that your Hawthorne strainer or julep strainer matches your mixing glass correctly. For example, this one matches my Hawthorne strainer but doesn't quite match well my julep strainer. It's a bit too wide, while this one is too small for the julep strainer. This one just go completely in, and this one is too big. So in this moment I have no way of straining a stirred cocktail using a julep strainer. But in this case the Hawthorne come to the rescue because it's way more adaptable and it fits all of these small ones. Now, one thing you might want to pay attention when buying a mixing glass is the shape of the spout. As you can see, this has a more pronounced and sharper spout, which is just right. While this one, while being a really cute mixing glass, doesn't pour liquids quite as well because the spout is just too round and shallow. So, while I love this one as a mixing glass by the looks of it. Once I have to pour liquids, they kind of don't pour right. The shape maybe is a bit too short, and also the spout too short, so they come out all chaotic and not flowing quite nicely. Now let's talk for a second about juicer. Juice is a really important thing in cocktails, and my favorite way to juice lemon and limes is with this juicer. But how it works is you put your lemon or lime upside down inside of it and then press it like this. This way of juicing lemon and limes is superior because when you press the citrus in this way, you're also expressing the essential oil trapped in the peel of the citrus, and that gives you a way better end result, a better juice, more flavorful. For bigger citruses, really any way to squeeze them is fine. I use one of these traditional hand squeezer. For pineapple, apple, pear and other weird shape fruits, I use a thing like this. I buy it usually new old stock because this big hunk of metal nowadays are expensive to produce, but once upon a time they were cheap. It looks a bit like a potato masher, but it's closed on the other side. You just put your fruits in this container and then you press them down. Of course, if you have a automatic juicer machine or something, just use that. Use whatever it's easier for you. This is a lot of effort, but because I juice pineapples and pears and apples really rarely, this is just enough for me. And now that we discussed most of the major tools I use, there are many other, but they are mostly like kitchen stuff, peelers and stuff that are not that critical. Let's talk a bit about glasses. And I'm gonna try to tackle glasses in the order I think they're most essential. And the most essential glass I have is this simple coupe. This simple coupe fits 90% of your cocktail that are supposed to be served straight up, meaning without any ice in the vessel. It has an elegant shape, and if you forgot to pre-chill your glassware, which you shouldn't forget, but in case you forgot, you can just do this. Get a couple of ice cubes, some water, and give it a slight twist like this, and in a few seconds your glass is gonna be chilled. Something that you cannot do with V-shaped martini glasses, but you can really easily do with a coupe, as your ice just turn around nicely like that, and there you go, a nicely chilled coupe. Once you have a nice coupe like this, every other glass is pretty much optional if you're a beginner, but let's go over a few of the one I like. Second most important glass I would say is a nice tumbler. I mean, you can get away with using just a simple kitchen water glass, but a nice tumbler where you can put a nice rock of ice to present your Negroni and your old fashioned is gonna make a good difference in presentation. Like this thing, like this, looks a lot better than a cocktail presented in a water glass like that. Even though the flavor maybe is not gonna change much. Actually, the dilution is gonna change. Having a big rock of ice is always suggested for cocktails like, yeah, a old fashioned and Negroni and stuff, because it's gonna dissolve slower. It's gonna give you a little more time to enjoy your cocktail before it's all watery. Then let's talk about V-shaped glasses. Now, this one you can see here is an IKEA V-shaped glass. It's really huge, and I think I use it only once in the last 5 years because I don't usually serve cocktails this big. But if you have your pitcher of strawberry margarita on your side...
You know what? That is a very good idea. I'm gonna go make a pitcher of margarita.
And you just want to pour it in, I guess this is gonna work fine for you. But that's not the kind of glassware I usually use. I prefer crystal glasses just like this too. And here's something you might want to pay attention. This Bormioli Rocco is slightly smaller in capacity, still holds a martini quite nicely. But while less elegant than this Riddle here, it's a lot tougher. And because it's just slightly thicker, I didn't break one of these yet. While this really beautiful reader, which is my favorite, is chipped here on the side. Somewhere, yes, here. And the other one I had, it's not with me anymore because it's broken. So that's always a trade-off you have to consider when buying like fancy glassware. Do I want something a little bit more practical but that's gonna last me a long time? Or I want to have something really pretty but that might break next time I look at it the wrong way. Anyway, V-shaped glassware, while not my favorite shape, is iconic for a reason. It's really beautiful. The hipster choice, and actually a glass I really like, is the Nora. This smaller coupe style with straight edges is a shape of the glass that was in vogue in the 1920s. Nick and Nora, they were partners investigators in some novels and movies, and they drank a lot of cocktails in these kind of glasses. I think it's beautiful, it's the right size for a Manhattan, a Martini, stuff like that. This one is from Sip and Guzzle, I think, and it's just a really nice glass. I love this, I use it a lot in my bar kitchen. Now let's talk about highball glasses, and starting from the Collins glass. Collins is really slim and tall. It's really nice, just be careful. It's smaller than it looks. It doesn't hold, for me, as much liquid as you're probably needing to make a nice gin and tonic, for example. This is more adequate, as the name says, for a Tom Collins. This shape is really practical. I use it in the kitchen, and I also use it for cocktail many times, like gin tonic and stuff, because it's just right for a 45 milliliters gin tonic. If I want to have a 60 milliliter gin tonic, I usually pull out the big guns like this one. If I want to be classy, I pull out this one, which is super thin glass. I'm scared to hold it, but it's beautiful, and it holds like 600 milliliters, which is probably as much as this one. And I use it just rarely when I need to have something bigger, like a tiki cocktail. I don't have proper tiki vessels. If you're into that kind of stuff, the world is your oyster. You can just have all kind of vessels for tiki cocktails, but I'm not an expert in those, so I usually use this bigger highball glass. Let's talk a second about metal vessels. Normally mint julep cups, they come in this shape, which might be some kind of metal plated with copper or bronze, but you can find some made completely of copper or bronze, I don't know. But my favorite metal vessel are these made of pewter. Pewter is quite rare nowadays. They still use it quite a bit in Singapore, where these beer glass come from. And I found the last producer, maybe in Europe, was right next to my house, and I got these two really beautiful pewter containers. They are not cheap, but pewter is an excellent conductor of heat. So when you have lots of ice inside these cups, they tend to sweat ice, basically. They become all icy on the surface, and they feel really nice in the summer. And I cannot say goodbye without holding anything in my hand. Let me try this Mancino neat. So I hope you enjoyed this primer into the world of bartending tools, and I hope you get some good tips out of it. If there are any other tools or technique or anything else I use in my video that you're wondering about and you want me to discuss in a future video, please let me know in the comments down below. So as usual, please like, subscribe, shake yourself a cocktail or stir it or anything. Just do a cocktail because I didn't this time, and hopefully I will see you next time. Cheers! A bit more acidic on the nose of this Mancino, I would say, but the flavor is really good, with a nice bitterness to it, like either from quinine or wormwood. Nicely astringent. This is excellent. I know, I saw like some comments online saying that this was dog shit. No, not at all. This is really good. I love this.